Good morning,
Sergey,
Professor.
how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing okay.
Great.
Hey, William. Hey, Farouk.
Hi, Professor.
Hi there. So we will wait maybe just another minute or two. Probably will be very small group. Right now, we only have 10 people enrolled in this class. And, attendance at the Zoom meetings is optional. So it might just be a small group. So Farouk, William, Sergey, you are invited. I'll sort of ask questions. And anything you want to say or out loud or in the chat is great. But if it's just sort of me presenting the lecture material and you don't have too much to say, that's fine too, okay? So this is new for me. This is the smallest class I've ever had with the online stuff. So we'll just see how it goes, okay, you guys? But I won't wait too long since I know we got a tiny little class anyway. I think really we'll start to read the book next week. I'll assign, we're going to start with the Pearl first. So when we start to read the literature, I think small groups, this small group will be great for discussing the book. I think it will be really great. But for a lecture like today, where I'm sort of presenting basic concepts, it might be a little small, but that's okay. We'll do our best. Are you guys all doing other classes for your major too this semester?
Yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, this is a different kind of ESL class. So Omid's here. Hi, Omid.
Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon. All right, we will start. And Omid, I was just saying, this is a very small class now. We only have 10 students enrolled, and attendance at the Zoom is optional. So it might be very small little groups on Wednesday, but if you can come and you have questions, even better for you. But for today, I'll just get started, and we will go from there. So yeah, it is week 2. It's January 26th today, and it is great to see the 4 of you. And for the other people watching the recording, it's good. I'm glad you're getting time to watch the video. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a warm-up activity. So for my 4 people who are here, if you can unmute yourself and talk, that's great. If you can't, then that's okay. We can go through it pretty quickly and I can just go on to my preparation materials. But we're going to talk about stories, right? Before we talk about literature, what is literature? Literary analysis, the different methods of literary analysis, right? And then, of course, applying those methods for literary analysis. I do like to take a week or two to really talk about the sort of deep roots of literature, right, is just humans telling stories, right? So today I'm just going to introduce some basic information about stories, and I'm going to talk to you about something called the hero's journey, or the monomyth, and Joseph Campbell. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of this, but really interesting and important research into sort of what stories are and where they come from. And then we'll see how much time we have. We can prepare for the Pearl, because like I said, we will begin with the Pearl. I'll begin next week by sort of introducing it, talking about some of the themes. So hopefully everyone has the book or will have it by next week. Since I've only got 4 people, is any problems getting the book at all, or probably not? But anything at all about the book before I keep going?
I got
ju-
mine.
Good, perfect. Omi, did you get yours?
Yeah, I got them, but just I want to show you
Yep,
if it
that'll
is
be
the
it.
correct one.
That's it, and that'll be for the end of the semester. You got the other
Yeah,
one?
and this one, this is the peer.
That's it. That's the one we're
Mhm.
going to start with next week. And Sergey, did I hear you? Sergey, you said you've got it too? Someone else said they've got it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Great. So yeah, bring it to class next week. I will introduce the author, and I'll give you the first big reading assignment for next week. So that's what we're doing today. But first, again, I'd love to hear from people, and if not, I can just sort of give you my answers to these questions. But here's our sort of warm-up question. We'll just do it together, is these 2 questions. Why do you think we're starting this class by talking about stories? And then as a sort of transition to what I want to introduce today and make connections with for the whole class is, in your opinion, your experience, whatever you want to say, what's the difference between a story and literature? Or we could even say, what's the difference between fiction and literature? And I'm kind of trying to get at the idea of, what is literature? When we're talking about literature, what do we mean there? So my 4-person class, before I just start giving my answer, can anyone have an idea about with either of these questions? Why do you think we're thinking about stories this way? And what's the difference between story or fiction and literature?
Hi, Professor.
Yeah, please, Farouk.
So about the novel, what do you think? Novel cannot be a form of literature too?
Well, I love that question. Yeah, what do you guys think? Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the same. In your question, Farouk, is my question too, right? Well, what's
Yeah.
the difference between a novel and literature, or like what's a really popular book, like Hunger Games or something? Is Hunger Games literature? It's a novel. It's fiction. So what do you think, Farouk? Like, I think some novels are literature. Do you think every novel is literature, or what do you think?
In my viewpoint, so for literature, I think it can be those works that are basically, academics and written based on evidences. And so about the angry book, I haven't read that book yet, so
Me neither.
I don't
Yeah,
have
I
much
didn't.
information about it. So
Yeah. Okay, so Farouk says academic is one word that Farouk said there. So when we think literature, maybe we think academic. I like that. And Farouk, do you mean there, is that about vocabulary? Is that about the topic of the book? Or when you mean academic, sort of what do you mean when you say academic?
I think for me, I think it's both of them. So it can be also the terms and terminologies.
Yeah.
And the words and also it can also be for example, if something is about if something I don't know how to say if it's something a scientific topic.
So interesting. So it's interesting too when you say scientific. I think you're right, of course. And I mean, science fiction is an entire genre or type of writing. But it's interesting, right? I mean, like when we start to read The Pearl next week, I'm curious, Farouk, if you will think, okay, this is scientific or not. I mean, I just think scientific's a really interesting word. So I think it's cool that you're using that to think about literature. I like that. I like that. So one thing, again, I'll just repeat what Farouk said, is this idea about academic. Is that about the topic that the story is that about? Is it the language that is used in the story? Yeah, interesting. Anybody else, Omid or William or Sergey, any ideas? What's the difference between a novel and literature, or a story and literature, or what is literature? Any ideas here?
I think literature это is all authors' works in general.
Okay.
No novels, poetry, essays, articles is literature.
Okay.
And
Okay.
stories it's much personal.
Okay.
I think.
Interesting. Okay. Much more personal. And
Yes.
Sergey's getting something important here too, which is it's about writing, right, Sergey? When you say novels or an essay, you know, usually when we think about literature, of course, we're thinking about writing, right? Reading and writing. It's not like
yes.
it's not like
Sure.
a performance or something where we're speaking. And okay, so then here's my question for you, Sergey. Do you think, and think about any context, any country, any language, a book that's very popular, very, very popular, right? Anybody can read it, everybody will read it. Is that literature? Like, does literature have to be popular? Does it only have to be academic, like Farouk was saying? Do you have an opinion about this? What do you think?
For example, in Russia, we divide literature on scientific literature and art literature.
Okay. Yeah. What's an example of scientific literature then?
Textbooks, for example.
Okay. So fiction and nonfiction. This is what the difference there
Yes,
is.
fiction
Okay.
and non-fiction.
Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And
Farouk,
art literature, it's different kind of literature. It's novels, romance,
like you were saying, poetry.
poetry. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Cool. And Farouk, is that kind of the idea? Was that a similar idea that you were saying there with this scientific literature, Farouk? Is that the same idea like Sergey was saying?
Yeah. So I also think that in terms of length, I think stories mostly they are short.
Okay.
And yeah, what people any writer tries to start with histories, writing histories first before writing novels, because novels can be so complicated. Writing novels, even for me as a second English speaker, when I read novels, sometimes I even don't understand it.
Yeah.
So it shows that novel is very hard, not only for the readers, but it's also for the writers too. So if you want to be a novel writer, then you have to practice writing stories, and that's what I think.
Good. Really nice. Really nice there. Yeah, I know Farouk there was saying about how long it is, but I would sort of add, you know, to that list is how complex it is, right? How that doesn't have to mean, oh, it's the author is trying to make something really difficult or really, you know, crazy. But I do think that you're right, Farouk, the length of it, or sort of the how much deeper material is in the story, I do think that's a part of what we're talking about. I do think so. Yeah. How about you, Omid? Can you talk? Do you have any ideas? What's literature? What's not literature? What do you think, if you can?
Literature is broadly, I think, about boats. It is about the work that is not too short, like the some stories, something. It is broadly on about writing, like any books, which is as you mentioned before, which is like considering on the deeper aspects of different works and writing.
Good, really nice. Yeah, that word deeper aspects, right? I think for many students, that is one of the big challenges of a literature class is, okay, we kind of know what's literature and what's not literature. And I want to be clear here, for me, at least in the US sort of university system, you know, and I have a degree in literature, that we are not scientific literature, right? Just to be clear for Farouk and Sergey, when I think about literature in this class, I'm almost always talking about like Sergey was saying, novels, essays, poems, and poetry. We, in this class especially, but I do think the way that most American sort of scholars use the word literature, I think we're talking about fiction. You know, we're not really talking about the scientific literature. I think that's something different, at least in the U.S. cultural context. You know, great. Great, really, really great. Again, sort of great ideas. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen for a second here, and then I want to show you something for us to talk about. Great. So some basic things we heard of what is literature. Some stories with a deeper meaning, and maybe they are longer or more complex. We could say two types of literature, scientific and fiction, or artistic, right, creative. And again, I'm going to say for us in this class, right, ESLW 350 is focused on the artistic and creative literature. Advanced vocabulary, that was kind of like Farouk's idea. And written forms, right? Literature means writing usually. A performance or a song or something cannot be literature. Although sometimes, you know, there are very rare examples, but usually, yeah, we're talking about reading and writing. Yeah, really nice. Now, I want to especially show a quick video and just see what you guys think. And can you remind me again, anybody, has anyone here done literary analysis before in any language, literary analysis? I don't remember if Sergey said that he did. I know he loves to read, but literary analysis, have you guys done this before? And if the answer is no,
yeah,
that's
yes, but in my native country.
good. Okay, great. Okay, great. So some of this today might be a little bit repeat for you, Sergey, but how about you, Omid or Farouk? Have you ever done literary analysis?
No, I don't have. I didn't have. I mean, when I was at school, when I was a student at a school, so
Yeah.
I used to write the poems in my own language. For example, we had the poems.
Cool.
Then our teacher asked us to express what this poem means. So, but I don't think so. That could be an analysis.
It's right. It's kind of close. Like if you're writing about your own poem, it's probably not analysis. It's sort of just like creative writing, you know, Farouk, like you get to be creative and you kind of know what you were trying to say. But it's a good example, Farouk, because you're right. What we'll do in this class is much more, we're analyzing someone else's work, and maybe we don't know, you know, exactly what they meant or what the meaning could be or should be, you know, whatever. But okay, but it's good. I mean, especially having some experience with poetry. After we do the Pearl, we'll do the poetry. So you'll have some comfort there because you know a little bit about poetry, or maybe you know a lot about poetry, but you had some experience, you know. How about you, Omid? Have you ever done literary analysis of any kind?
As Farouk mentioned, we just did but it is not like as the literary, but we did at the school the same thing as Farouk mentioned.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Great. And that's great. And again, I only ask just to make sure, okay, how fast should I go? How slow should I go? What do students already know? What should we talk about? So this video is not, it's basically just about this idea about all of you said, right? The deeper, like part of literature, what it is, why do people write literature? And then why do we take a class, you know, where you can get 4 units of college credit? is this idea that there's some deeper meaning going on in literature, right? And this video that I'm going to play for us, it's really short, but it just introduces this basic idea. And then I want to after this, show you another video that goes a lot deeper on sort of how we can begin a literary analysis with any story, right? And why stories are so essential. So I'll leave the closed captions on. There's no test or no quiz for this. It's just a way to introduce some of the ideas that we're going to practice all semester long. Okay, so this is called Mining Literature for Deeper Meaning. Excuse me. I'm going to mute myself and just play it for us, and then we'll talk about it.
We often hear that studying literature involves finding a deeper meaning to a text. When writing about literary works, we're expected to mentally dive below the surface in order to come back up with big ideas. But you may find yourself looking at the flat page of a book, wondering how deep it can really go. How do we reach those ideas that turn into great essays? Well, there are two crucial thinking steps that can lead us in the right direction: practicing insight and acknowledging complexity. Insight is the ability to arrive at an intuitive understanding of a big idea using only small clues to get there. If you're practicing insight, you'll be able to use observations about character behavior to figure out their true emotions and motivations. Pay attention to little things because they add up to what is really meaningful. For example, if you consider a character like Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, who openly declares his dislike for Miss Lizzie Bennet, you might at first assume he's just a mean guy. But using your powers of insight, you're noticing other smaller things, how Darcy's eyes linger on Lizzie's face and how he seems all flustered when she's around. Add to the mix your knowledge that Mr. Darcy is in a much higher social class than Lizzie, and your sense of insight should be telling you that there's something more here. In this case, it will tell you that Darcy's surface behavior is in conflict with his true feelings of attraction, because the difference in wealth between himself and Lizzie makes him feel that it'll never work. Thinking about all those small clues gives us insight about some of the big abstract ideas within the novel that we can approach in an essay. Appearances versus reality, the power of wealth and social stratification, and the unpredictable nature of love and attraction. Look at that, deeper meaning. The second step to a sophisticated analysis is acknowledging complexity. Let's face it, in both life and literature, situations are complicated due to social forces like relationships, moral codes, personal desires, and power structures. This means that there are, at any given time, multiple factors that shape what is true. In order to acknowledge complexity in your writing, refrain from making broad generalizations about a text or establishing quick, simple judgments about a character. Explore each facet of your subject carefully and make sure to consider multiple influences on events. Explain the tension of multiple forces that create the story. For example, a basic analysis of Toni Morrison's Beloved, where the protagonist has killed her own child rather than allow her to grow up in slavery, might sound like this. Setha murdered her own daughter. This act was wrong and causes the ghost of the child to haunt her throughout the novel. These observations are simplistic. They don't acknowledge all the different forces that contribute to what the character has done. Try something like this instead. A culture of slavery disturbs the ability to determine what is morally right. Setha's past experiences with violence reinforce the fear she has for her child's fate and transform the murder into a protective act. As the novel progresses, Setha is haunted both by the angry spirit of her daughter and by the memories of everything else slavery took from her. Here, we see those influential forces at work, and we've shown off our ability to understand the complicated nature of the human experience, which again allows us to access those big ideas that reveal the deeper meaning of a story. Ideas in this case, like the parameters of maternal instinct, the consequences of injustice, and the question of whether or not ethics can even exist in a corrupted moral system. It's impossible to sit down and write an amazing essay about literature without first thinking about it. Before you hit the keys, go back to the text and fish out the small moments, the complicated moments in the story. Line them up in your mind, practice insight, acknowledge complexity, arrive at some big ideas. Before you know it, the deeper meaning will be close at hand.
Great. And again, I know the video goes very quick. Those are two famous English language examples that you probably don't know or didn't read. That's fine, right? Pride and Prejudice and Beloved, you don't need to worry about them. But I like to play this video at the beginning of the semester because it's almost like planting a seed in your mind, right? In that I love the first example in the Beloved video where it sort of says, what the character did was wrong. You know, she did this thing and that was bad. This is not literary analysis, and I'll say why, is because this is just sort of summarizing, right? What I like to tell students at the beginning of the semester in this class is, you know, you already took W340 or 300. You know what it is like to think about complexity, right? To conduct or complete some kind of research, analyze some idea or some facts from different points of view, and then come to sort of some synthesis, some argument about that, right? The difference, though, is instead of writing a research paper like in 300 or 340, where you get to find newspaper articles, scholarly articles, textbooks, like we were talking about, you know, scientific literature, the only sort of materials that you get, well, not the only, but at first, you know, the only materials you get are the evidence that is in the book that we read. You know, the first book that we're going to read, The Pearl, it's very short. It's only like 80 pages, right? But when you start to do a deeper analysis, right, of what's in that book, and really the deeper question of, who cares, right? Like, what's the meaning of this story? Why? What, the Pearl is, I think, 70 years old now, and we still read it. Why do we still read it, right? What is in there that gives us some deeper meaning for us to care about? And that's what we're starting to do when we do literary analysis, right? Now, I'm going to sort of show you a couple different styles of literary analysis, you know, how to do that. But I think it's really important to remember, right? I'm not asking you guys to write reading comprehension summaries. You know, I will never ask you, you know, write a short summary of what happened in the book as like a reading quiz. I don't care about that, right? Either you read the book or you don't read the book, right? But if you know, when you read the book, if people make time to read the book, the only thing I care about is going deeper, right? And we'll talk about what that is and how to do it. But I like this video that talks about, right? Insight, you already know how to do that because you're here in this class. Like I said, you passed 300 or 340. You know how to sort of think creatively. The second part, the complexity part, that can take some time, right? That can take some practice in understanding, well, what is the complexity in this book? You know, what kind of information and evidence should I consider as I ask deep critical questions about what happened in the book, right? And again, that's what we'll really start to go into in much more detail next week. Does this make sense? Any questions about some? I know it's a pretty basic introduction, but any ideas or anything from watching that video or listening to me here? Farouk, please.
I just want to say, I hope I don't get it wrong. So with the literature analysis, you mean, for example, for the Pearl, we are trying to find what the author, what is the purpose, or what was the purpose of the author writing this book. Am I correct, Professor?
Yeah, partly. I mean, I think yes, and let me make that a little more complex, though, is maybe you don't want to argue that this is what the author was trying to say or the author's intention, because think about it like an argument for a research paper, Farouk. You know, if your argument at the beginning of your research paper is John Steinbeck's intention was XYZ, that's a very hard claim to prove because we don't really know exactly what his intention was. He's dead, you know, we don't know. But so I'm being a bit very specific in your answer, Farouk, but you could say something like, you know, by the end of the novel, the impact on the reader is, right? Or the most powerful, deep meaning in the book is, right? And now you are making a specific claim about sort of the deeper meaning in the text. And then you go back to the text And by the end, we'll talk about using outside sources. You know, other people have written things or opinions, or other people have written literary analysis about that book. So maybe you read what they said about the book, and now you sort of combine another person's literary analysis with your own experience and opinion with the text, so that you can say, you know, the meaning of the book is, or the most important theme in the book is, or we could talk about character analysis this semester. We'll talk about character analysis, right? The character of Juana, that's one of the women in the book, represents whatever, and then you make an argument about what she represents, right? Now, I know that that might feel very similar to what you said, but again, when we're, you know, in a research paper, the more specific your argument or your claim at the beginning of the paper, the better. So I don't want you to think about what was the author's intention. I mean, who cares, right? But you can ultimately you can make an argument to say that the results of the author's work, or a full analysis of the symbols in the text show, and then you can make that argument. And that's a little bit different than, you know, what the author was trying to say. Does that make sense, Farooq?
Yeah, Professor. Thank you.
Yeah, but you're exactly correct. I mean, what we'll do in this class is you will read something, think deeply about it, and then make some kind of claim, right? Make some kind of argument.
Or can we also claim how, for example, how stronger this book is, for example?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think partly this is hard to do at the beginning. When we start to read the book, we can be very specific, right? We'll have a specific example, but yeah, I mean, I think you are on the right path, Farooq. You know what I mean? You're both of your ideas. You're getting there. Exactly. Exactly. I like it's clear, like you understand the ideas, and you're kind of ready to start trying and applying them, and that's what we'll really get to do in the first couple of weeks here. So cool. Anybody else? Omid or Sergey, questions about that video, or about our sort of just general introduction to what is literature and what is literary analysis?
And Professor, I will be leaving by 1 o'clock because I must go to work.
Sounds good. Take care of yourself, and then watch the recording when I post it. Omid or Sergey, anything? Because I've got one more. We can finish with this topic, and then I got one more thing.
No, Professor, no question. Just need time to thinking about it.
Of course. Yeah. Omid, anything? Questions or any ideas?
Yeah, just I wanted to add about the analysis that we are going to do. So it means that, as you mentioned before, either we will take a side, or it should be in an argumentative. Either we should take a side, or we can argument that we show that we are against the idea that's written.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all research papers are argument essays, in my opinion, right? Yeah. Because whatever you wrote in 300 or 340, you had to have some kind of opinion, and then use your evidence, right, to prove that you were correct. Yeah. I mean, that kind of is all research paper, I think. So I think you're exactly correct when you say, when you do a literary analysis, you will make some kind of argument, right? Because, for example, in the Pearl, maybe you could say the Pearl is a book about good and evil, for example. Or you could say the Pearl is a book about men and women and the relationship between a husband and wife, right? Honestly, as you'll see, both of those analyses, you could find proof or evidence for both, right? So it's mostly about what you choose to focus on and what you choose to sort of make the center of your argument, right? Now, again, this is some people love this type of analysis because it's like, oh, I mean, any option is open, right? If I closely read and understand the text, then I can talk about this example from the story or this moment in the story. But it's hard because there's no 100% clear proof when you're doing literary analysis. Part of it is kind of feeling, right? Part of it is art. And that is a little different than the scientific literature, where it's like, well, I always think about, for example, like evidence related to climate change. I mean, like there's some facts, you know what I mean? Like if you just say the climate has never changed in human history and it's not a big deal. I mean, this is wrong. You know, that's a
Yeah.
wrong, that thesis statement is wrong. But if you say something like the Pearl is all about women, about gender roles, well, that might, I mean, that might be okay. That might be a clear argument. And again, I'll give you more examples of this, but the Pearl takes place in a town in Mexico in like the 1950s. So you couldn't really say like the Pearl is a book all about, you know, like what, feudalist Japan in the 14th century. You know what I mean? Like if you say that the Pearl is about ancient Japan, okay, that's wrong, right? That's like saying that's a clearly wrong argument. But there are different ways to interpret or analyze literature. And again, some people love that and some people don't love it. So no, whether you like it or not, I can show you how to do it, right? And create an argument that is one that you at least agree with, you know. Yeah, sometimes I think people feel like, oh, with literary analysis, you know, there's never a wrong answer. It's kind of all just, you know, your feelings and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of truth to that, but there is a science to this, I promise. A little bit of science. A little
Professor?
Yes.
What about can we also criticize the writer
Yes,
when
absolutely.
doing the analysis?
Yep. Yeah, if you want to make a commentary on the author, a commentary on one of the characters, or an assessment or criticism, absolutely, right? If you wanted to say that in the story Juana behaves selfishly, absolutely you can say that. You just need to give an example from the, right? You need to, your evidence, you need to support your evidence and say, you know, at this moment in the story, when she says this, or you summarize what's in the story, absolutely. I'm going to say that's all part of making a claim, right? Or an argument. So if you claim the author is a racist, okay, give me some evidence, right? Exactly. Yeah. And in that way, I think it is similar to what you've already done in 340, right? That's very similar. It's just sort of the materials that we use to prove it, is different. And that makes sort of the way we prove it can feel a little bit different too. But you're exactly correct with that, Farouk. Yeah. Cool. Amazing. And like I said, we'll stop talking about this in an abstract way next week, but I'm already happy because again, Farouk, just the three of you, really good insights, good questions. Okay, so now I wanted to show you one thing because this idea about mining literature for deeper meaning, that's the evidence, right? Like Farouk is saying, if you want to make a criticism, I need to go back and share my screen here again, excuse me. If you want to make a criticism of the author, or if you want to make a criticism of the character, you can do that. But again, you got to get your proof. And for many students, finding the proof or knowing what counts as good proof is a big challenge, right? And one way that I can say today, and I'll show you next week, is, you know, symbols, right? What we find in the book, the examples that are included in the text, this is really, really important, right? But there's another level, a sort of deeper level that we can talk about that all stories sort of share. And again, I'm going to show you one more video in a minute here to help sort of plant that seed and get your mind ready for deeper thinking about the books, right? And what I wanted to show to you is this thing that I love and is super interesting. And if you want to learn more about it, man, you can get some really cool information and details, because there's this idea, there's this theory. And here you can see where it says Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is British and English. I think he's born in England, but lived throughout the US for a long time too. And he was an anthropologist, right? He studied sort of human society and human culture, and then became really interested in literature and religion. And he studied this across societies from ancient times into modern day. So going back to, you know, some of the earliest human stories that we know that were ever written down. And of course, before writing was invented, the theory is that humans were talking and sharing stories for a long time before some of the first stories that were ever written down. And when he completed an analysis of all these different stories, he wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And as I say here, he argued that there is a single story, a monomyth, that all cultures across human history share. And like I said, he came to this conclusion after studying many different cultures throughout history. And he believed that this monomyth proves that storytelling is an essential part of being a human being, something that is almost as important as language itself. Now, I'm going to show you this slide and then have a video to make the examples more clear here, okay? But this is his theory, right? And I'm showing this to you again because this, the hero's journey, is a sort of, I'm not going to say easy, but a nice first step to think about when you begin to prepare to analyze literature, right? If you're kind of like, okay, how do I want to analyze this? What kind of argument do I want to make? What kind of claim can I make about this story? There's this really interesting and cool idea about the hero's journey, right? And I'll show you this and then we'll show the video, but it's a cycle, right? The hero's journey is a cycle. So think about all of the stories from human history. Think of even like a folk story from Afghanistan, a folk story from Russia. This does not matter. One of the most famous examples he talks about is a story from India from 4,000 years before Christ. So that would be, almost 7,000 years ago, 6,000, 7,000 years ago. Does this analysis on this story from 4,000 years BCE and the structure of that story lines up, right? So at the beginning of all good stories, we have a hero, we have a man or a woman, and they're living at home, and then what happens is they get this call to adventure. Something happens, right? War comes, or they find a map, or they get an invitation that they need to leave, right? Some kind of adventure is going to happen to start the story. And as it says here, they might get supernatural aid. Like I said, a teacher, a wizard, a magician, a priest, some person with more knowledge or power might come and say, you really need to do this. It's time to go. The adventure is calling. And then here where it says the known up at the top, when they're still at home, and then the unknown, eventually what will happen is the hero leaves home, crosses this threshold, and begins this change and transformation that will happen to them during the story, right? So they get the call to adventure. Hey, here's the treasure map. Ooh, they get supernatural aid or help from a guardian. Maybe, like I said, a friend, a family member, a teacher, a mentor. Oh, your father left this map for you and he always wanted you to leave and go start your journey, whatever. And then they leave, right? And then they leave home. They cross this threshold from the known world into the unknown world, right? And now we're here on this part of the circle, and they get challenges and temptations, right? The first big difficulty that they find, they see things that they've never seen before. They have problems that they have to solve by themselves, right? And as it says here, these are the changes and temptations. And here where it says beginning of the transformation, where we understand our hero is beginning to grow or change, right? Now, at the bottom of the cycle here, right here where it says revelation, this is usually literally here in the structure of the story, just a story beginning, middle, and end. This is the scariest part of the story, the worst part of the story. We think, oh my goodness, how will something ever happen? How will the hero be saved? Something happens, and this is the abyss, right? This is where the hero really thinks that they might die, but something happens. And that's where you get this revelation, death, and rebirth, right? Death and rebirth at the lowest part of the story. Think about a movie too. This is the structure for so many movies, you guys. It looks like something terrible is going to happen. Oh my God, what's going to happen? And then after this low point, the abyss, the hero is transformed and changed, right? So after the abyss, we get transformation. The hero is changed. And if the hero needs to make atonement, needs to apologize, needs to do something, right? We get some kind of symbol, some kind of action that shows that they have changed and that they've been transformed. And usually that happens when they return back to the known world, right? They go back home. And again, we're going to watch a YouTube video that gives a lot of examples of this, but if you, maybe you can think of it right now, this same structure, the call to adventure, crossing the threshold, temptations and challenges, the abyss, death and rebirth, transformation, and then the return home, right? Where the hero returns back home to the known world, but is changed, is different. And we, whether we saw the movie or read the book, we understand that the hero was changed, right? We understand that that journey that they went on, we recognize it as well, right? So this is the cycle of the hero's journey, right? And again, I think that many times students are surprised to see how common this same structure is. And we can apply this hero's journey structure to a lot of literature. And in fact, you know, I will ask you to practice this a little bit in the first couple weeks of the semester here, is how to apply the hero's journey to some of the stories that we will read together, okay? So I've got a video that gives more specific examples about the hero's journey. So let me make sure we can hear that. And I'll play this for us, and then we'll talk about it a little bit together as well, okay? Yeah, this is the one I wanted. Okay, great.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely, but let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo? Well, you're human, just like them. The hero's journey myth exists in all human cultures and keeps getting updated because we humans reflect on our world through symbolic stories of our own lives. You leave your comfort zone, have an experience that transforms you, and then you recover and do it again. You don't literally slay dragons or fight Voldemort, but you face problems just as scary. Joseph Campbell said, "In the cave you fear to enter lies the treasure you seek." What is the symbolic cave you fear to enter? Auditions for the school play? Baseball tryouts? Love? Watch for this formula in books, movies, and TV shows you come across. You will certainly see it again, but also be sensitive to it in your own life. Listen for your call to adventure. Accept the challenge. Conquer your fear and claim the treasure you seek. And then do it all over again.
All right. I love that video. So does this make sense? I know it's only 2 of you now, but I hope that does this basic concept make sense? Again, we'll get to spend some more time with it, but I'll go back to show it on the slide here. This structure, and again, when they say 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the video, they're sort of talking about the like a you know where it would be on the organization of a clock here, right? So status quo, 1 o'clock, call to adventure, but it's that same structure, right? It starts, it's a cycle. It goes in a cycle, and these are sort of the steps in the hero's journey. Does this make sense? Do you guys agree or disagree? Anybody can anybody, Sergey or Omid, any ideas about this?
Yes, I agree. I know a lot of short stories, a lot of myths from my nature literature and world literature about the same things. It's like transformation of main hero.
Yes.
He was a ordinary weak person, and after he complete the circle, he became strong.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. Good. 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 Yeah. Omid, what do you think?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
And I like it, but some people, it's good for some people and bad for different people, because they live not in ordinary world, they live in imagined world, special world.
Interesting. What do you, can you say more about that? I want to hear from you, Omid, too, but what, yeah, I like this idea, Sergey. What do you say a little bit more?
After some people read same book,
Yeah.
they make a good conclusion for themselves and change their behavior, their life. And some people just imagine that they strong person.
Well, that's really interesting too, right? People say they want to change or they want to transform, but then maybe they don't transform.
Yes, yes.
There is no transformation.
They transform only on their mind.
Right. Interesting.
Not in,
and do you
not in life.
Really interesting. And do you think, and are in that example, I agree, Sergey. And in that example, do you feel like that is characters in a book, or that's like human beings in real life, or both, or only one? What do you think?
I think it's humans. Just
yeah.
Because in book really good example for transformation.
Yeah. It's interesting too, listening to Sergey there. I was thinking about, can I think of any books, literature, you know, famous books where the character doesn't change, right? And maybe there is a character that doesn't change, but usually they're not the hero, or maybe they're the hero, but they're like an anti-hero, right? They're kind of like they're not really a hero because they don't transform, they don't change. And I mention this because it is connected a little bit to, okay, well, what makes a good story, right? What makes good literature? If you read about a person's experience in a story, in a novel, you know, and they never change, nothing happens to them and they never change,
Yeah.
it might not be a good book. I mean, like, it might not be interesting, it might not be enjoyable. Now, again, I know, again, that's not always true. Again, like, especially in the 20th century, and of course, many, especially in Germany and Russia, you had authors who were trying to point out or write about the absurdity of life or the difficulty of life, so things don't happen, right? Maybe they don't change, but that's tricky, right? That's a sort of commentary or criticism of society, to have a character where, you know, nothing happens and nothing changes. That's more common now for sure, but in the past, I think it was very uncommon. So
Yeah.
Sergey's comment just made me think about that. That's really interesting. And I do agree, Sergey. I think it's very human. Yeah. I mean, what do you think? Do you recognize this structure, the hero's journey? You know anything about it? What do you think?
Yeah, it was interesting, and I just when I was watching this, so it reminded me my situation when I moved from my home country to the United States. Yeah. Starting
yeah.
from the known part and when entering to the new world, so definitely challenges, difficulties. And right now I am about that I passed the challenges, and like I was in the on the part on the bottom.
Yeah, I'll show you. I was gonna say the abyss.
It
Did
was
you
like
pass? Did you pass through the abyss? I mean,
yeah, definitely, because I remember the moments that how I came to the United States and how I started my life here, and how I decided to work or to study here. So it was really difficult time for me, and
yeah,
it makes sense.
yeah,
And it was, yeah, it was like right now I'm above that
excellent.
point. Yeah, because right now I remember those things, that how I entered the American River College. I didn't had like I didn't had car. I was used to walk long distances. I got like 2 buses in order to reach um, some schools in order to find out where I can start. It was really difficult, and this video remind me the situation that I had, and this is really useful.
Nice.
And it's
That's great.
yeah.
That's great. I love it. And you know, it's perfect, Omid, because I have a slide ready to talk about this, to say, okay, now I'm going to try and make some connections between what we've sort of introduced today, right? This idea about literature, what it is, analysis, why do we do it, and stories, right? And this Omid's example there, I think, gives us some answer, right? So why does the monomyth matter in our personal lives? Well, what I think, right, you can agree or disagree, but I think that this matters for issues of transformation, right? And Sergey talked about this too. Sometimes we get stuck telling the same story about ourselves over and over again. And when this happens, it can feel like we never transform or grow. So one possible way to change our feelings or our thoughts about ourselves is to change the story that we tell about ourselves. Right? I mean, and Omid, you kind of were talking about this, right? When you first got to ARC, of course, very understandable. Maybe the feeling or the story is, wow, this is so hard. I don't know if I can do this, you know, and that makes sense, right? Of course, that is the story at that time. That's the truth. That's how it feels, right? But then when you sort of pass through the hero's journey and you come back up on the circle, then the story does sort of change, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think I'm so happy that I'm always happy when students say that this makes sense, because of course it does, right? And I think one reason that I love teaching literature, even though it can be difficult, is, Joseph Campbell. Again, there's a link in here, and I'll put some links if you're curious in today. Let me go back to Canvas here, but in the live support materials for today, along with our recording and the PowerPoint, I'll put some more links in here about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell. But Joseph Campbell's argument, his what he sort of says is, well, who cares about this hero's journey, the monomyth, who cares? This is his idea, right? No, it's when we understand the way that different cultures tell the same story, it really makes clear to us sort of why stories are so important for human beings, because they affect and change the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, the way we understand and make sense of our own lives, right? And I think really that is what literature could be or should be, right? And now, so you all three of us, we had great examples. Of course, now in 2022, literature can be academic and it's advanced vocabulary and there's big, deep stories and there's crazy character. All that stuff is true, right? But I really think at the heart of everything, right? The center of literature is stories, right? And stories are so important to us for this hero's journey myth reason, right? It's kind of how we make sense of the world. It's kind of how we make sense of being a human being. And I'm very happy that you're not in the abyss anymore, Omid. That is, I'm happy to hear that. That is good.
Thank you so much.
But of course it is a cycle. And eventually, I say this about myself too, right? This will happen again. We'll be back in the abyss. Things get hard, new things happen. Eventually we have to leave our known world. If you continue on to Sac State, okay, well then Sac State or UC Davis, that's unknown at first, and then you'll figure it out, right? Then the unknown becomes known. But it's a cycle for a reason, right? It's a cycle for a reason because it can keep happening in our lives over and over and over again.
Yeah, we face the cycle again and again. And
I know, I know. But we learn to enjoy it when we get some peacefulness, right? When we get some peacefulness. Great. Well, because there's so few of us, we're going very quickly. I was going to show you something that maybe you could do for homework, but maybe we can start it in class right now. So I'm going to go into our Canvas webpage here and show you. I think only a few people have done the first discussion. So I did want to, oh, excuse me, I'm going to go into announcements. But I did want to show you, I opened up the discussion number 2. So I'm going to click here and then tell you what we're doing here. All right, so lesson 6 says the power of telling your own story. And here are the instructions. Read and review the discussion guidelines and the rubric. I'm going to show you that right now. Watch the TED Talk, The Power of Telling Your Story by Dominic Colenso, and then respond to the questions below. So first, I didn't have time to show you this last week. I think I just told you, read it, review it. Or you can say, I need to fix, this is from last semester. But I did want to show this to you now. And again, for the people watching on the recording, explain the instructions and the rules for the discussion posts. We won't have a discussion every single week, but we'll do some discussion activities in Canvas for sure. So here are the instructions for all of the discussions in Canvas this semester. So this semester, you'll write several Canvas discussions so that you can connect and share ideas with your classmates online. First, you'll post your own response to a question that I ask. I want you to write at least 150 words. Yes, I will count your words if your post looks too short. Then make sure that you directly respond to my questions. In other words, answer the questions that I ask you and not something else. Again, shouldn't be a problem at 350 level, but sometimes people just write about whatever they want. answer all the questions that I ask. So if you see 3 question marks, you know you have 3 questions to answer. And then this is something that I didn't talk about, so I'm not worried about it for the first discussion post, but I do want at the end of your response, ask a question that you still have about the prompt, the topic, some ideas that we talked about in class. So if your question is just, you know, hey, I wonder, does anyone else feel like they experienced the abyss in the hero's journey in their own life? That could be an example of a question, right? Or an example could be, I don't understand, what is the monomyth, right? I don't really understand, what do they mean when they say monomyth? You just ask that at the end of your post, okay? So that's what you'll do for your first post. 150 words, answer my questions, and then ask a question that you still have. Then I want you to write at least 1 thoughtful reply to your classmates. You'll write at least 50 words for each reply. And write a thoughtful reply. So just write something more than just, oh, I like your ideas, or you're super smart, or that's really cool. And here it says we'll have a tutor. Excuse me, I need to change this, so I'm going to close it. We won't have a tutor. It's just me, but I will also reply to your questions in the discussions. Okay, so you'll see me posting in the chat, in the discussions as well. And then just information about the scoring here. You get 10 points for your first post and 10 points for your reply. So your post was at least 150 words and you responded to my prompt and answered the questions, 10 points. And then you wrote at least 1 thoughtful reply worth of 50 words. That's worth 10 points as well, okay? So this is the instructions for the discussions. I know we've only got 2 of you, but Sergey or Omid, any questions about the rules and the guidelines for our discussions this semester? Makes sense. You've been doing online long enough, you know how Canvas discussions go. Yeah, exactly. All right, so here's lesson 6 is the last thing where we're going to think about storytelling, hero's journey, and all that stuff. Again, like I said, before we get started with the Pearl next week. So here's what it says. It says, read the discussion guidelines in the rubric we just did. Then watch the TED Talk, The Power of Telling Your Story, and then respond to the questions below. So it just says, in the final 3 minutes of the video, Mr. Colenso argues that the stories of your past shape the stories of your future. He also believes that retelling stories from our past can improve our lives. How does he think this will help us? Do you agree with Mr. Colenso? Why or why not? So I'm going to open the link to the TED Talk.
Imagine this scenario.
Sorry, this one's pretty short too. So here's my question. Since it's just the 2 of us, again, I'm please be patient with me as I figure this out. I've never had a class this small online, so I'm sort of figuring out the best way to do it here, you guys. Here's my question, Sergey and Omid, just you 2. Do you want to watch the video right now together and then talk about it? Do you want to just end class early and do this? You could do it on your own right now. What would be the best for you guys?
I think if we do it later on, or we can do it right now as well, I don't have problem with that.
Either
Okay.
one?
I
Yeah.
agree with
Sure.
Omid.
So no preference. How about let's watch it? Even if we watch it and talk about it for a few minutes, we probably will finish before 3:20. My clock is an hour, is a time ahead, but we'll probably finish before class is supposed to be over. So, okay, perfect. Give me 1 second here. Okay, let me get this ready, and then we'll watch it together and talk about it a little bit. Okay, so in the chat, I'm going to share my screen again. in the chat, I'm just going to post the questions that I want you to answer in the discussion, okay? So just so you can see these while I'm playing the video. But really, let's just watch the video and then we can talk about these questions, and then you'll probably be ready to just write. Maybe we can finish class and then you guys can just post your discussions if you want. But so I want you to be prepared to answer these questions. In the final 3 minutes of the video, Mr. Colenso argues that the stories of your past shape the stories of your future. He also believes that retelling stories from the past can improve our lives. How does he think this will help us? Do you agree with Mr. Colenso? Why or why not? Okay. So here is the video. I'm going to mute myself, but then just watch it and then be prepared to talk about those questions, and then we'll wrap up for today.
Once upon a time, 4 simple and very powerful words. From a really early age, we're exposed to the magic of storytelling. Since human beings first walked the earth, we've been sharing stories, warning each other of mortal danger, teaching right from wrong, inspiring our tribe to action. The latest science tells us that when we hear a story, our bodies produce the hormone oxytocin, and we instantly start to form a connection with the person that we're listening to. Stories bind us together and help us make sense of our experience. I'm a storyteller. I started my career as an actor, became a theatre director, and I now help business leaders in the digital age reconnect with the power of the spoken word. I'm here today to encourage you to embrace your own story and share more of it with the world. The reason that I say more of our story is I believe that most of us are holding back. In the bite-sized world of social media, we tend to share only the selected highlights. Our Instagram feeds and Facebook walls proclaim to the world all those wonderful things that are happening to us. You know those carefully staged selfies? Let's give this a go. Everyone say TEDx. 1, 2, 3, TEDx! Well, those pictures only paint half the story. Like it or not, we've become museum curators, archiving our achievements in digital form. And yet for many of us, those posts only paint part of the picture. It's like watching the trailer for a movie but never actually seeing the whole film. You get a sense of the action, but the experience lacks any emotional depth. Think about all the things that you've achieved in your life so far. That series of events that's led you to listening to this talk. Those amazing adventures and all the disastrous decisions that make you who you are. How well do you share those stories? Do you share them? Or do you keep them to yourself? Most of us dismiss our stories as either irrelevant or embarrassing or uninteresting, and yet those stories are vital in helping our audience understand who we are. And when I say audience, I mean anyone that you communicate with, your family, your friends, your team at work, or 300 complete strangers at a TEDx event. When you share your stories, you create connection. When I started my journey as an actor. When I decided at 16 years of age to go to drama school, I thought it was going to be easy. You go to drama school, land your first job, work your way to the top. Simple. The reality was very different. The journey was a lot less linear. I had a huge high. My highest point, I was starring in a Hollywood movie, flying around the world, signing autographs. At my lowest, I was working in a call center, trying to convince people that I'd never spoken with before to part with their credit card details. Not an easy job. However, when I started a new chapter of my life as a public speaking coach, I had an instinct to dismiss my past. I felt that if I wanted to be taken seriously in the world of business, I needed to project a more polished corporate image. I stopped telling my story. It was a really flawed strategy. One rainy November afternoon, I found myself sitting in a dull office in the north of England, sipping tea with my business partner, very British. My new business was a couple of months old, and we were struggling to find our identity. We weren't making any money. All of a sudden, my coach asked me a question that would change everything. Why don't any of your marketing materials mention your past? Aren't you proud of it? Well, of course I'm proud of it, I replied. It's just not relevant. The second that those words left my lips, I realized my mistake. In denying my previous experience, I was creating a story and turning it from something interesting and unique into something bland and vanilla. The drama had disappeared and the narrative had become dull. In an attempt to try and fit in, I had lost my sense of identity. I see it all the time with the clients that I work with, a reluctance to share the things that make us who we are for fear of appearing either boring or arrogant. And yet, those stories are the very thing that make us who we are. I'm not advocating being boastful or regaling people with a long list of all your accomplishments. I'm advocating sharing things about yourself that help you connect with your audience. We don't read the CVs of the people that we admire. We read their biographies. We want to peek behind the curtain, to experience the highs and the lows. Sharing your story is an act of vulnerability. It requires allowing yourself to be seen. But with vulnerability comes power. In the digital age of social media, the age that we live in, invisibility and anonymity, they're just not an option. A quick Google search of your name and reams of data appear. Your story is out there. It should be you who tells it. Now, whenever I talk about what I do, I reveal a lot more about my past, the highs and the lows. I talk about the fact that I've flown a spaceship. It's true. I've lost $1 million. Also true. And I've been fired by Simon Cowell. It creates intrigue. It opens conversations, and I encourage you to do the same. I want to prescribe sharing some part of your story at every opportunity. Why? Because it will make the world a more connected place. We live in a time-poor society where we're encouraged to keep things brief, to stick to the facts, to ditch emotion for logic. But we are imaginative beings. When we give our stories voice, we allow them to resonate in the hearts and the minds of the people that we interact with. As soon as a story has been told, its power multiplies. As soon as it passes the lips, it exists in the imagination of both the teller and the listener. It has momentum. And stories allow us to do more than just document our experience. They allow us to imagine and create what is yet to come. The traces of our past shape the narrative of our future and will continue to influence the stories that we tell. It's a simple three-act structure: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Every person in this room has a unique story to tell. I guarantee that if we were to share the collective experiences of this audience, we'd have enough material for several blockbuster movies, and yet many of us dismiss our past as uninteresting and irrelevant. I thought the same, but now my past is my biggest asset. So, I challenge you to start sharing more of your story immediately. When you leave this event, rather than standing on your own, summarizing your experiences in 140 characters or uploading the perfect photo, find someone you don't know, walk up to them, and share a little bit of who you are. Reveal something about your past. Tell them how it relates to your present and give them a glimpse into your future. For example, I might say, my name's Dominic Colenso. When I was 21, I starred in a Hollywood movie. I'm here today because I've been lucky enough to be asked to talk on the TEDx stage, and next week I'm going to be working with the leaders of a global payments corporation to help them improve their public speaking. Past, present, future. It might feel like a step outside of the comfort zone, but it's an act of generosity that will create instant human connection, and who knows where that connection could lead. The stories of your past shape the story of your future. Once upon a time, that time is now. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Omid gave the little yellow clapping hands. I love it. I hope that means you enjoyed the video. Yeah. So maybe before we finish, we can just talk a little bit about the questions. We can go as deep as you guys want. But yeah, so as I say here, this is what I'll ask you to type about in the discussion. But in the final 3 minutes of the video, Mr. Colenso argues that the stories of your past shape the stories of your future. He also believes in retelling stories from our past can improve our lives. How does he think this will help us? Do you agree with Mr. Colenso? Why or why not? Omid, Sergey, you wanna, anything you can or want to share with the class that you might write about for your discussion post?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Colenso, because then you tell your past stories and analyze it, you may avoid mistakes, previous mistakes, and your future will be different.
Nice.
So about retelling stories. When you listen someone's stories, you may find parallels with your own life, and so you may avoid mistakes.
I like that. Well, and he talked about that a little bit too, right? About how the listener and the speaker affect each other. So interesting. Sergey's idea there is really connecting to how you can impact the listener, right? If you hear someone else's story, that can help you get a different perspective or a different idea or something. I like that. That's cool. That was in the video a little bit, but I love that that's what Sergey was interested in there. That's cool. That's interesting. How about you, Omid? What do you think? In just general thoughts or about these questions? Yeah, what do you think?
I want to just to say that this is 100% true, that the stories have
Did we lose you? I lost your audio.
that our
Oh, there we go. You're back.
yeah
You're
yeah
back.
I think I have an unstable internet connection.
It happens.
Yeah, I don't know why.
It'll happen.
Yeah, just I was talking about that. I'm 100% agree, and it is definitely that our past stories uh, is powerful, and it will change our future as well positively when we sometimes go back to our stories, and when we tell some our stories to others. Uh, I believe that it will not improve our lives, but it will improve the our audience, the person that we are telling our stories. It will improve their life as well. Has I experienced this before in my life? And when I was coming, when I moved to the United States first, a lot of people keep telling me that you cannot start university or college right here. It is difficult because you have family. If you work, if you study, who will work and who will support the family, like this. But I was just told him that, you know, that right now the college is not empty, right? There is a lot of students right there. Every one of them, they has their family. So how they doing their studies and they are supporting their family at the same time? So I started to go forward, and I had a lot of problems, as I mentioned before. I didn't have car, so it was very difficult for me, and I already written in the previous assignments on something about ourselves, so you
Yes.
will see that.
Yes, I will.
I have mentioned about how hard it was for me to go to the college. So but in order to be to focus on the point that we are talking about, these difficulties that I have faced through my life in the start in the United States, right now, my friends that they are coming new in the United States, I always keep telling them my story. And I see that how my story changed their perception. And right now, because they don't know about the situation right here in the United States, it is really difficult. If you don't work, so you will not support your family. You know that it is the most difficult thing is that you how to afford the rent house right now. So if you're paying like a huge amount for the house.
Yes.
And I didn't give up. I started the college after I came in 2019 on October, and I applied for the college on the early 2020, right after 3 to 6 months after my arrival here. And right now it is my fifth semester, and I'm studying at American River College. I'm a full-time student. I study from 8 to 4 o'clock, and then I go to work. I do a self employment, like I'm working as a DoorDash driver.
Yeah.
Delivering food from 4 to 10 o'clock at night. So this is regularly I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And when I told this story to the people that are coming right now, and I have one of my friends right now, he is living with me. He just left the camp 2 weeks ago. He was really depressed, and he was thinking about how to manage his life. I told him my story, that no problem, that you can do whatever you want, but you have to have like an a goal for yourself.
Yeah.
That is it. So right now he's feeling better. And when I told him all my stories, that how I went through this situation, so he is really energetic right now, and he feel that he can do it.
That's amazing.
And this is really, I believe that his stories are really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I love both you guys talked a little bit about the impact or the change that stories can have on other people, on the listener, right? Which I think is really
Yeah.
cool. I think that's really cool and really interesting. And listening to you, Omid, too, I was thinking we have stories in the video. I think he's talking a little bit about the story that he tells about his own life, right? His own experience.
Yeah.
But in your story, there's also in what you were saying there, Omi, there's stories we tell about, you know, when you get to America, it will be whatever, you know, it'll be so easy. There's so much opportunity. Sometimes people have that idea or that story in their mind. And then, like you said, oh my God, California is so expensive. The rent is so crazy. You know, like, it's sort of like, it's not just the story that we tell about our own life. It's sort of the story that we tell about where we live or our friends or our family or whatever, right? So changing those stories is also really, you know, can be really powerful as well, I think. So really interesting, really interesting, and really good example. I always say, since it's again just the two of you, and of course, for if you're watching the recording, hi. But what I always like this, because I have this experience a big time in my own life, where I'm going to share my screen for a second here. Well, I'm going to stop and then I'll share the picture. So a big part of my story, and I'm going to talk about a story that I had to change about myself, right? Not about other people. But when I was growing up, again, I have love and respect for my mother and my father. But one thing that they just did not do a good job was about food and being very healthy. You know, many people in America are very fat, very overweight, lots of junk food and not a lot of exercise. And this was true in my family. You know, my mom did not really cook food or healthy food, lots of bad junk food. And so I was really very fat, very overweight from the time I was very young, like young kid. I was always just a really big kid. And the biggest that I ever got, now I'm going to share my screen. Here's my story. When I was 25, I weighed 365 pounds. That's like 170 kilos or something, right? This was one of the last pictures that I took before I, you know, started to change and lose my weight. But I was, you know, 360 pounds. And I think for a long time, my story about this in my own head was, that's so terrible. It's an embarrassment. I'm ashamed. You know, if I met a new person, I never wanted to talk about this. I never wanted to show this picture and say, you know, this is what I used to look like. But I think I had to accept, you know, okay, well, when I was a kid, you know, I could not choose what I was eating. You know, you just eat what mom and dad give you. So, okay, it's not my fault that I was that fat when I was at, you know, 7 or 8 years old. But when I was an adult, you know, I could make changes and I could make food for myself, and sort of, I think changing this story about, oh, it's my mom and dad's fault. That's one reason that I was able when I was 25 to say, okay, enough. Like, I'm ready. I'm in charge of my own life. It's no one else's fault. You know, I don't want to be so fat forever. And I think that was just for me a big example of how I changed a story about my own life, right? And I think that is a little bit different than what what you guys were saying about in your own experience. But it's one reason that I like this video so much is the story that we tell about new opportunities, a new place, a new country, right? California, whatever. The story we tell about other people, oh, this person's a bad person, or oh, she's a bad, whatever, right? But also the story that we tell about our own life and our own experience, you know, when we can change that story, especially in my opinion now, if it's a story that you've been telling yourself for a long time, oh, I have bad luck, or oh, I'm an unlucky person, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, that's just an example. When you can change those stories, I think amazing things can happen. You know, amazing things really can happen. So yeah, that's my example that I like to share with, not always, but since it's just the two of us, that's my own example for sort of why I think stories are so important, why I love to talk about stories and teach stories. I think stories, I already said this, but I think stories really are one of the most important ways that we make sense of the world. And one reason I love to teach this class is hopefully it will allow you, empower you to think about stories in a new way, and not just your own life story, right? But of course, the stories that we read in the book. You know, I think the examples and stories that we see in our books can be the inspiration to sort of change our own ideas or change our own opinions or change our own experience. So again, that's just a little bit about my philosophy, you know, for this class and why I like to teach it. Yeah, I don't know, any other last ideas or opinions about the video or stories or anything for today?
About the discussion post, so
Yeah.
about that, why or why not we are agree or not agree. So we
Please.
should, I think we should bring our reasoning, right? For
Yes.
example, one of the reasons that we are agree is that our own story will be like a good experience, a past experience for the people that they're listening to that. For example, as I mentioned before, that people was telling me that you cannot be successful if you do study and work at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's still the people that they are newly coming to the United States, they feel the same thing.
Yep.
So we can bring this kind of reasoning as well.
I completely agree, Omid. Yeah, for this first discussion, again, the first two discussions are pretty gentle, you know. I think you're right. The why or why not, your proof, your evidence of your own opinion is probably going to be some specific example or experience. Now, again, you don't have to write about your own really personal life if you don't want to, but certainly it sounds like you already shared, Omid, so thank you. But, you know, if someone watching the video, if you want to write about a friend's experience or the experience of a family member or some other own example from your life, that's fine too. But absolutely, yeah, I think, Omid, the best way to say why or why not is to give some personal example or some specific example that may be from your life or a specific example that you know about. Yeah, I think that's very wise, Omid, very wise, yeah. Any other ideas or questions from just the two of us about lesson 6 or any of the other topics we talked about today?
No question.
Cool.
No question. Thank you.
Cool. Great. Well, thank the two of you, and I know Farouk was here too. Thank you both for being here. Again, I know the first couple weeks will go really slow, but we're going to start to go fast next week. Bring your book, right? Bring the Pearl. I will introduce the book. I'll introduce background information about the author, and we'll really start to talk about some of the elements of fiction and especially symbols, right? Next week, we're really going to introduce symbolism, how to identify symbols and symbolism in texts, and then start to think about what those symbols mean, right? Because using symbolism in your literary analysis, it's important. It's important. So that's what we'll start to do next week. Okay. I am going to stop the recording right here and then say goodbye to you guys. So thank you both so much. It was great to see you.
Thank you, Professor.
Same here.